I made a video not long ago about that 90s mix sound and what was a big part of the reason mixes sounded the way they did in the 90s. And I'll make a link to it so you guys can see it if you haven't caught that video yet. But the bottom line is that people were hitting tape very hard, a lot of the mixers, in order to achieve a certain sound. And what I realized from reading a lot of your comments was that it's so alive and well, the debate over how important analog gear is to the recording and especially mixing workflow. You know, when we focus on getting the sound as good as possible at the source, I think it's more widely accepted that you basically need some sort of good sounding preamps into some kind of good converter. And if you can get a compressor in there too, you're doing very well. And the sound will be significantly better than just plugging straight into an interface, for example. I think that's more widely accepted than the concept where you need archaic pieces of equipment like an API Axis console or an SSL, that costs as much as a house. I mean, it's more widely accepted in the recording end. When it comes to mixing, nobody wants to believe that they need those things or that those things are even helpful. I looked up the price of an ATR 102 recently. So it was like, there's one for $15,000 on Reverb from Italy or something like that. And, you know, I don't know, man. It's just, when I think about this stuff, I think there's so many mixers more and more every day that go towards mixing in the box. But a lot of that, you can't take the human part out of what we do, and convenience is such that if you work on enough stuff, the ability to just pull everything up at the drop of a hat with the click of a button winds up being so nice as a thought that you might be inclined to abandon the idea of needing a console or even working in a hybrid way where most people who work hybrid essentially don't touch their gear that much. They just run through it like I used to do. And it just, in thinking about the fact that so many people, chimed in the comments saying that, like, they get something when they're mixing using outboard gear or a console that they really feel like they can't duplicate or recreate in the box. So even though I know so many mixers have gone that way, I'm also forced to consider the idea that there's plenty that also haven't. And, why are they feeling like they need to? Why did I want to mix in the box? And why did I switch from a hybrid situation to mixing in the box? Most of it has to do with convenience. Most of it. Since I've been in my new room, I haven't tested out my old setup with my new setup as of yet. In other words, I have new speakers. I have a room that's much more well treated than the room that I was in previously using my hybrid setup. So even though nobody wrote this in the comments, it's something that I cannot help but think about, which is I sit here working on a room that I, built somewhere at the end of January in there on speakers that I've had for a month and a half or so. And I think to myself, I'm also using another variable, which is mixing in the box, that I never really did in the other setup, not entirely. So when I combine all these things, I think to myself, I know the other workflow better. What would it sound like? So this caused me to talk about something else with you guys also, which is I recognize in myself that whenever you have a stance on something where you refuse to let in outside words or opinions, and you just sort of isolate your thought process into thinking you know what's right or you know what the best answer is, once you get there mentally where you're unwilling to let in outside information, you're always going to be coming from a place that's messed up. You're never going to be really operating at your full potential because you're shutting out something. I find that the most enlightened people are usually the ones that allow everything in and still make their own decisions based on everything they're taking in, but they are also willing to change their mind. They're open-minded enough to always try things. And if they decide that the way they were thinking makes sense after continuously being open-minded enough to keep trying things, then it was the right move. Or at least it's the right move at the time, at that moment, until you may reevaluate later in however long, maybe only a month, maybe a year, maybe a week. The point is, being open-minded is not something you can be for a minute. You have to live your life that way. You have to live your life thinking, I can always learn more. I can always take in more information. I used to think that people who change their mind are weak people. They're people who are not strong in their beliefs or are somehow less trustworthy because they're flippant. They change their opinion. They decide today they feel one way and yesterday they felt some other way. And the older I get and the more mature I get, the more I realize that although it may be uncomfortable to deal with somebody who does that, it still might be that people who do that are actually taking in information all the time and are always open-minded to another possible solution, which in my opinion is what we need. That's what we should all be striving for. It's what we need to achieve the most, whatever our highest potential of achievement is. For everybody, it's going to be different. Everybody's goals are going to be different. So I think most people's goal is to become as great as they can possibly be at some task, at something that they either love to do or it's their job or whatever, however you're connected to it. You want to be as great as you can. So the way to achieve that is to always think you don't know the answer. Always be willing to accept that something else may be correct. And where I sit at the moment, I find it, and like I said, nobody actually wrote this as a comment, but it's such a good one that reading your comments brought me to this understanding. I was reading a lot of people talking about how, they've tried both. They've worked in the box, they worked out of the box, and they feel like, they can get 80% of the way there using in the box only, 80% of the way there. But to get that rest of the way, it's quicker for them, it's easier for them. And no matter, if you go listen to interviews from anybody who had the ability to use both for long enough, and a lot of them will tell you that it's not the same workflow. And it's something I recognize, is that I had to work very, very differently as soon as I started to mix in the box in order to make myself happy with the mixes. I had to work so different. So when I sit here and I'm trying to make myself happy while also using speakers that are new to me in a room that's new to me, I think to myself, what's not new to me? Not new to me would be bringing the Fusion and the MBP into the workflow and the 5060, and at least using that as a baseline for what something sounds like that I'm familiar with using, a workflow I'm familiar with, and using that as a control in the experiment that already has arguably too many variables. The room is a variable, the speakers are a variable, there's a lot of variables here. So I find that the way I'm working, I'm actually getting kind of comfortable with working in the box. However, how do I really know that I'm as happy as I could be if I don't compare it to something? So that's where this idea came to mind about, man, I really should bring the stuff, set it up, get it going, and then compare what I do there to the in the box and do it using these speakers that are allowing me to hear better than I've ever heard in my entire life, in a room that's allowing me to hear better than I've ever heard in my entire life. So it's like, why take all of that and diminish the part about use what you know, at least if nothing else for a baseline of understanding, to then at least know how far away I am from what I like, or to maybe cause myself to reevaluate the entire process of, am I as happy mixing in the box as I think I am? Because that's the other thing. I am somebody who's lucky enough to have both. I have another room with everything set up that I could combine into this room, and like, I don't have to go out and buy the equipment to test this out, but I do feel an itch, so to speak, about sitting here thinking that, oh, I can do everything I used to do in the hybrid world, and I'm just as happy in the box. I hear myself saying that, and then I think, how do I really know? I never switched. I never used the hybrid here, and with the better speakers in the better room. I never did a back and forth. So, am I lying to myself? Am I just stating a bunch of things because it's easier? Because I want to be comfortable mixing in the box? Maybe. I might be. That's what I think. It's like the self-reflection stuff is really something that I find it takes a certain personality to be able to look at yourself and say, maybe I'm bullshitting myself. And without really trying it, how do you know? So in a way, I feel like I owe it to you guys to try it, because then at least I know I'm doing right by the concept of, which do I really prefer at the moment? Because again, everything could change. Time will change you if you let it. You can't just sit there and try to be the same person forever, because if you do, you are also not growing. There should be some pain, some uncomfort, and that, when I think about it, I don't want to set it up. I don't want to move the stuff and set it up and change the idea that this was a simple workflow that I had going that's easy to recall things, and I don't want to. There's a lot of this would be a pain to do that comes into play, but so what? That's part of it. I think that's part of it. Put yourself through a little pain, a little struggle, thinking about what to do and how to set it up. And, I'll probably have to spend a little bit of something to be able to get the connections needed to work in this room instead of the other room. It's a different interface, I have two rooms essentially. And in this one, I can't just, it's not so plug and play at the moment, but it could be with a little thought, time, effort, this and that. But at least then I'd be coming at it with an open mind. And every time I have a closed mind, eventually it gnaws at me. Sometimes, and this is something I want you guys to realize, there's a voice in your head at all times. It's talking to you. It's trying to tell you what you should do. When you're sitting, when you're deciding if you should go hang out with your friends at a bar or something, the voice in your head that says, nah, go downstairs and mix that song. You want to get better at mixing, you should be mixing that song. You're being pulled to go do live sound somewhere. Nah, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe your focus should be not spreading yourself out into all these different arenas. Maybe you should just be focusing on the thing you're trying to get good at. Maybe the voice in your head is telling you what you need to be happy. And whether or not we listen, that's on us. So when I hear that kind of voice talking to me, I don't assume I know what it's saying, but I have to listen. And a lot of times it calls you out on your BS. And it's, it, maybe I should have sold that stuff off the second I moved in here, maybe. Because if I did, I wouldn't have been thinking, let me try it. But the fact that I didn't, I think is a blessing. And maybe I always knew it was going to come to trying it. Maybe. I don't know, maybe, who knows what the foresight would be there. But the point is, I should try it. And you guys, I'll bring you along on the ride. We'll compare one in the box, one out of the box kind of thing. I also very curious to try this tape situation. So I'm going to figure out a way to get some of the things that I might have access to, used here some way, in some way, shape, or form. I got an old friend who's family friend, close, tight. He's got an old school, like a Fostex, like cassette 4-track or something. And I know the quality of that ain't an ATR 102, but I'm curious what would happen if I took a mix, did a little something in the box, and just kind of ran it through that. I'm then curious what would happen if I took the same mix, ran it through the summing and all that, and then ran it through that. I'm also curious what would happen is just compare a mix in the box to a mix that's hybridly mixed like I'm used to doing, but the speakers in the room is now something that will be the same. So not touching that, not moving the desk, just listen to that. And I also have access to a reel-to-reel that is an old school reel-to-reel from back in the day. My dad actually brought it home from Vietnam, and it's like one of those Akai old school quarter-inch reel-to-reel deals, and it's a 2-track. It's not anything more than a 2-track, but just curious what it would take to get something like that into operation. It might be impossible, and it might be one part broken on it that makes the whole thing a no-go. The last time I messed with it, there was a part that kind of was so oxidized that it broke off in my hand, and I'm going to look and see if I could find that part. And if I can, maybe I'll get that thing going, and we'll also compare it to that. And again, it's not the same quality as a Studer, or an ATR 102, but we'll see. We'll put it over there. We'll see. We'll just kind of hear what's good. And if it doesn't work or I can't get it working, I'll share that with you guys too. But the bottom line is we're going to be trying some stuff because why not? While I'm alive, while we got time, why not learn some stuff, see what matters, see what doesn't, and why be so dedicated to this concept of always working in the box? Fact of the matter is, mixing engineers have a little bit of a luxury. We don't have to go touring with a band, and we don't have to go on the road and go to different places. At least I don't. Maybe some people do. But the point is, producers have to be in the room to work with the band. We don't. So I have the luxury of setting up my hybrid rig and using it. No one's calling me to go to California right now and mix on a laptop. So I might as well try what I got at my disposal, and we'll see what happens. So anyway, I'm curious what you guys think. I know that it's disheartening for people who only mix in the box to hear otherwise, that there's somebody doing something else or that somebody thinks it matters or doesn't, and that could piss people off. I get it. Bottom line is, when you invest in anything, you're taking a risk. And the risk to invest in a plugin for $150 is a low risk. So a lot of people are willing to take risks like that. But when it comes to like investing in even a summing mixer for $5 to $6 grand or more, or a bunch of or an Eve MVP or an SSL Fusion, or just investing in any pieces of gear, you run into the problem where what if this breaks? What if it doesn't do me any good? What if it stops working? I mean, these are things people think about. Somebody was talking about how they had a set of speakers they spent a lot of money on, they stopped working after the warranty was up or something. Anytime you buy anything, you run this risk. So more people are going to not want to take risks if they can. It's just the way the world works. There's not a lot of people lining up to take risks. And, because I'm in a fortunate position where I have some stuff, why not try it? And why not show if there is a difference? And, people will chime in on whether they hear it or not, or whether it matters or not, and whether everyone's going to listen on their cell phone so it doesn't make a difference. That's okay, Everybody's got their own opinion. It's all good. I'm curious what yours is. So if I could tell you anything, it would be always reevaluate yourself. Always reevaluate what you're doing, how you could improve. And anytime you find yourself planted in the ground with your idea of this is the way it is, be willing to reevaluate that. Because as soon as you're not, you're no longer growing. You are now only as good as you were that day you made that decision, and you will stay that way forever, essentially. That's how I look at it. So, and, I'm not saying you should spend money, but just also consider that everybody out there who makes software, that's the cheapest way somebody can go. It's the cheapest way and the least risk that a business can take to make money. They write the code, they put together a plugin, they sell it to everybody, and they don't have to manufacture anything, and they don't need any inventory, and they don't need to take risks of people like buying the thing. And because it's low enough price, everybody will buy it. Everybody who has a laptop will buy it. So the market is there for the software, whereas people who make expensive stuff, not a lot of people can afford that or are willing to take risks like that. So there's always going to be less people who can try those things, there's always going to be less people who are willing to talk about it. There's always going to be less people because out of the amount of people who can afford them, which is smaller, and the amount of people who decide that they're going to make content about them, which is also small, like you're just getting a small number. So I understand why there's so many people who push mix in the box, because it's affordable for everyone, essentially. And the other thing isn't. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be talked about, because truth is truth, reality is reality, and everybody has their own views on this stuff. And I would like to hear, for my own sake, the difference. So selfishly, for me, I want to know how my stuff compares in the box to out of the box, using great speakers in a great room, which I never had the luxury really to use until now. Because even though the room before was okay, speakers were okay, it's probably better than a lot of people have, I understand. This is better. I'm in a better position now, so I might as well reevaluate. So that's where we're going to pick up very, very soon. I'll keep you informed on the whole thing as it's going. So you guys got this. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. I appreciate it. You guys got this. Take it easy.